So as in most kind of assessments of any joint, you're going to observe first of all. And so the first thing that we're going to look at with James is that he's kind of holding himself up. We can see that. So just relax for us, James. There we go. And so always look out for that. As soon as sort of people stand in front of you, they sometimes try and do the right thing from a posture point of view, or they just feel a little bit tense about doing it, which is fair enough. So make sure that they're kind of nice and relaxed. And so, you know, we're going to focus mostly on the shoulder, but realistically, particularly if you're working with sports people, you're going to be looking at, you know, right down thoracic, you know, the lumbar, the glutes, any kind of asymmetries through the whole kind of system, and the front, the trunk, and all that sort of stuff. But for tonight, we're going to focus mostly on what I look for in the shoulder. So, there is a bit of conjecture about, you know, observing the position of the scapula. Does it matter in that static kind of, in that static position? There's some, you know, systematic views, one that says it does, one that says it doesn't. In my clinical experience, you know, anything they're seeing, even if there's a big asymmetry or some wasting or anything like that, it still has to marry up with your clinical symptoms and the subjective exam. So you still have to kind of link it together. It can't just be, oh, you know, you've got a really dyskinetic sort of shoulder, scapula. They might have absolutely no pain associated with that. So you always have to marry it together. And part of the assessment, you'll see we do that quite a bit. So first things to look at, anything glaring, sort of from an asymmetry point of view, any muscle wasting, any muscle overactivity. You know, people always talk about the overactivity of the upper trap, and people say, oh, I really feel tight in my upper trap, and it's much maligned, the poor upper trap. I love the upper trap, it's a really important muscle. What you generally find, you can see this on James as well, is that it's very much an overactivity of the levator scap. So if you know your sort of surface anatomy, this bulk here that's actually quite significantly tight for James is actually his levator scap. So your upper trap is this muscle along here. So I'm poking my nails, in which I don't recommend, and you can come a little closer. But you can see this is his upper trap here, and this is his levator scap here. Okay, so a lot of the tightness you see, and particularly around that lower cervical upper thoracic area, is actually his levator scap. Okay, so when people say I feel tight, you know, I've got an overactive upper trap, it's most common that it's the levator scap and not really the upper trap at all. Okay, so you know your upper trap is a really important muscle, and you know, people get worried about it being overactive. They stab it with dry needles and tape it to stop it from working. But in fact, a lot of the time, it might be the only upward rotator contributing to the very important motion of your scapula, which is that upward rotation, okay? So that's the sort of thing that you commonly see in people, you know, who might present with some bit of shoulder pain, and lots of people you would see with neck pain as well. So I kind of look at that. You know, as I said, any kind of wasting that might suggest there's a neuropathy or something more sinister going on. Obviously from the side, you know, looking for, you know, the kyphosis, the dowager's hump through there, and as I was saying before, through the thoracic sort of spine, of the lumbar spine. So even in this position, getting a bit of an awareness, if you can, of where the humeral head is sitting. We're going to sort of palpate for that in a moment, but you know, is it the most common thing that you see is that sort of anterior sitting sort of humeral head, which can have implications for how the shoulder functions and the biomechanics of the shoulder. And then having a look from the front. So looking at any asymmetries, particularly of the clavicle, it's usually easy to see. You might be looking, you know, if you're suspecting either from the subjective of an AC joint type pathology, you know, is there any asymmetries in the AC joint, any swelling, anything that you think is of concern. And obviously, even just through the whole kind of system again, the pecs, the trunk, what's actually happening, is there any asymmetries that you can see, or any kind of wasting, any kind of overactivity that is of concern that you need to sort of look into a little bit more. All right, so that's just your observations, turning around.